I pledge
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
And Ann, if you would read the meeting procedures, please.
Welcome to the Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, April 12th, 2011. Agendas are available on the table at the back of this meeting room. If you are here to speak on an issue not appearing on the agenda, you may do so during the public comment period. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. When you speak, clearly state your name and address for the record. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker, which will be monitored by a timer on the podium. If there is a person speaking on behalf of a group with no other testimony from another member of the group, please identify yourself as such, and your time may be extended at the pleasure of the board. Keep in mind that the chairman has a discretion of limiting the total discussion time on any item. It is requested that all pagers and cell phones be either turned off or put in the silent mode. Thank you for your participation and cooperation.
Thanks, Ann. Next is public comment. This is the time when anyone from the public can address the board on something that is not on the agenda, keeping in mind we can take no action. Is there anyone from the public who wish to address the board? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and start with supervisor reports. Jack?
I don't actually have a supervisor report, but I thought this might be the appropriate time to ask that in the future, in advance of Board of Supervisors meetings, if we could get all PowerPoint presentations electronically the Friday before meetings so that we have time to review them, because they often differ from the staff reports, it would be very useful to me. So I would just like to make that request.
So we'll move on then to the consent agenda. These are items intended to all be taken in one motion, but we're happy to pull any and discuss them individually if there are requests. Tom?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I might, just a minor correction on item number 17. It's under the sheriff. It's a contract between the sheriff, coroner, marshal, and principal decision systems. We have the amount correct in the staff report, but some gremlin changed it in terms of the listed item on the agenda. The total cost in there is $67,982 on the agenda. As it's stated in the staff report, it should be $77,014.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask that item 11 be pulled from the consent agenda for discussion.
That being said, with those two changes, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda with the one change and with item 11 being pulled. Roll call, please.
Aye. Aye.
Montgomery?
Yes.
Wygant?
Yes. And item 11. Community Development Resource Agency Planning, U.S. Forest Service, Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit. Brett, there you are.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman and board members, good morning. I'll talk about this, but I wanted to give you an answer to a question that was asked by Supervisor Montgomery yesterday. We looked it up. Lincoln is, we took it from Tahoe City, 95 miles away. Quincy is 86 miles away, and Honey Lake is 134 miles from here, but it's closer to 395, so sometimes it works going that way. So. Yes, that's one way. Yes.
Thank you.
Again, question from yesterday's discussion. Pleased to be before you with the Master Stewardship Agreement, and hopefully if you could give me a couple of minutes and then maybe I can answer your questions you might have had. The Master Stewardship Agreement was enacted by Congress to allow for a 10-year contract so that the Forest Service would be able to assure that material would be removed and the procurer of the material would be assured of having a long time contract so that they could plan and project their costs out. We're very fortunate that we were able to do this. The Department of Agriculture is actually looking in Congress right now to extend the time limit to as far as 20 years. That will be a new bill, I believe, next year. There is standard language in here which may have caused some of the questions that people have. And there's phrases such as timber harvest, timber removal, and also biomass removal. Again, those are standard language, but I'll give you an example how it would apply to us and how it would not apply to us. I wanted to read, if you would allow me, the purpose and primary objective of this contract. We clearly added language in here that showed why we were doing this and how it differentiates from normal stewardship contracts. And it's on the first page, 99, attachment 1, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down. The purpose and primary objective of this Tahoe Basin Biomass Master Stewardship Agreement is to reduce the number of acres of fuels burned annually on National Forest Service lands within the Lake Tahoe Basin by entering into a stewardship agreement with Placer County for removal of biomass from National Forest System lands. The biomass removed under this project will be generated during implementation of fuels reduction and forest health treatments currently being conducted and/or planned within the wildland-urban interface on National Forest lands. So clearly the purpose is to not burn the material and to use this for energy and other purposes, which is the primary purpose of this. Just to let you know, the approvals of this, I started 2 years ago on this contract to work with them. Not only did the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit, but the Pacific Southwest Region Forester, which covers Hawaii to all over the West Coast, approved it, as well as the USDA in Washington, D.C. It's a first of its kind for specific biomass purposes, and I wanted to make sure that you knew that. They recognize your leadership in this area and wanted to reward you with this. There is no specific commitment in this Master Stewardship Agreement. Each year, we will have meetings with the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit to discuss priority projects. We'll determine if there is available funding on both sides. You'll see there's some funding in here for different activities that the Forest Service brings to us. We will then match that funding with either grant funding or, again, yes, back to yesterday's discussion, should our proposed facility go through, there would be funding from the power purchase agreement that would help fund the removal of these current biomass that is not going to Loyalton or anywhere else because it's not affordable to bring off. We would set the priority projects mutually. We would then bring back individual project agreements back to this Board of Supervisors for approval before actually moving on anything. So you'll see a series. For example, in 2011, I expect at least 2 contracts to be brought back to you. One is, let me rephrase that, I expect 3. One would be for strictly biomass removal. Right now we have plans in the Burton Creek area right near our sheriff's substation and courthouse. There are a large number of piles in that area that are slated to be burned this year. They desire not to do that, so we're going to work with them on removing those piles. It's also next to the Burton Creek State Park area, where, as I said yesterday, we've got projects going so we can save costs by doing that all at once, and that would be one agreement I'll bring back to you. A second type would be a biomass removal with some timber thinning, and that's in the Kings Beach area where there have already been some piles generated that, again, are going to be burned. The Forest Service desires to remove a few more of the trees that are problem trees in that area that they feel are going to fall and become a fire hazard. So that project would have a blend, and we would hire a contractor that would cut down a few trees, but mostly grind and remove the biomass. And then the final type project that we'll have this year is really a demonstration project, and I spoke of that yesterday in Spooner, which is in Nevada, where we would technically be a partial timber harvest and biomass removal, and because it's a demonstration project, the Forest Service wants us to handle it because we'd actually be bringing in a couple of other experts to look at the economics of it because they really want to understand whether steep slopes is valuable or not. So we would actually cut down some trees. The contractor we would hire they would actually sell those in the market, and that cost would come back to the project itself, and then the biomass removal would be ground and hauled. That one, in case, would go to Honey Lake, and the monies would come back as a part of the overall package. And again, I'm still working on the economics of that to see whether that'll work or not to bring back to you. And with that, I hope that answers, but I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
largely answers the questions I had and that some of my constituents had, and the concerns were two. One, that the agreement with the Forest Service is not an agreement for us to be suddenly creating new timber harvest plans. These are existing projects that are already proposed on the books. Then the second piece of that is...
And NEPA is already performed, and all of that is done, yes.
Noted, yeah. And then the second piece of that is that where there is timber removal, actual timber removal, it is not our expectation that that's going to be ground up and go into the biomass. We're going to be using the waste associated with those.
Right.
for these
Logs should
existing
not be
projects.
created into biomass. It's not its best and primary use.
Thank you. Those were the clarifications I needed, and I hope that clarifies for the people who I know are watching today who weren't able to be here.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Move approval.
Moved and seconded to approve item
11.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move on to our first department item, County Council Report on Appointment Practices, Board of Supervisors. Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the beginning of this year, your board, in its custom, met and discussed the assignments for committees. That was somewhat controversial. The second meeting after that discussion, the board, as is its routine, brought the formal list back for approval. That consent item was removed, and there was public discussion on it. As a result, the chairman indicated at that time that he would like a further discussion of this matter at our meeting in Tahoe. We are here. I have written my short summary. People say I can't be short. I have one page. It's pretty short. The board has evolved slightly over the years that I've been working in the county, and certainly over the years that I've been county council in this process, but it remains largely the same. Under state law, the powers of the county are delegated by the state to the county and broadly to the Board of Supervisors. There is no individual delegation of authority to individual members. Thus, the classic phrase, it takes 3 votes. Secondly, under the county charter, the people of Placer County did not choose to empower any particular board member, particularly the chairman, with powers of appointment. Now, this is distinct from many, many cities. If you see city charters, it's very common for city mayors or somebody like that to have the power of appointment of committee and controlling committees' assignments. So the board has always reserved to itself the complete power to make its own appointments. It does so with very few limitations. One of the limitations is that some occasions, by contract, it has designated with some other party that a particular seat will be filled in a particular way. We have one current seat like that in the Joint Powers Authority with the City of Roosevelt. It requires that at least one member of that Joint Powers Authority be the sitting representative from the 1st District. Otherwise, the committee assignments are rather broadly empowered to the board. Some of these committees are created by other people. They're created by the state of California. They're created by compacts with other states. And some of those rules do not allow staff to attend. And so the board is required to send only an elected board member. Within that prerogative, the board makes those decisions, and in essence, it's a 3-person vote. The process is rather informal. Generally, our first meeting, on rare occasion the second meeting, but almost always the first meeting of the year, the board will notice that it will discuss its committee and assignments. It will meet. It is largely a repetition of the existing assignments. There's not a lot of movement of assignments in those meetings. What you'll note, if you were to follow that process, is that whenever there's a change in elected officials, obviously there's a reassignment process that goes on. This year, there was a motion by one of the board members to change one of the existing seats. That was supported by a majority of the Board of Supervisors. The clerk of the board, in her power of responsibilities, created the list as directed from that meeting, and then it's brought back and was formally voted on and has been adopted by the Board of Supervisors. That's the process, that's how we do it. I don't know if there's any questions, but that's my report.
Thanks, Tom. Any questions, or Jennifer?
I don't think there's questions from me, but I think comments. And I just kind of want to emphasize a couple of things. And I think you did it well, Tony, by saying that there was controversy at the beginning of the year. And I actually felt a little bit of awkward about the whole process. The first comment that I'd like to make is that, and I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, but I just kind of wondered why we were outside of the board chambers in a room off to the side. If that's tradition, I understand that. But at the same time, I think these decisions and any selection process should have a certain degree of sunlight. The second thing, in leading up to this whole discussion and decision, I was a little bit concerned because I really didn't see a standard fleshed out. There had been discussions of prior situations that happened in District 5 with regards to removal. And this is kind of an issue that I think if it's been multiplied time and time again, it's something that we really need to, I think, spend the time and get into the weeds on this to have a discussion as to how we move forward, maybe establish some type of protocol or baseline for making a removal decision or a transition decision. Other things that I think that need to be factored into the discussion or discretion. When the issue surrounds a particular district, what's the weight of the supervisor's decision or discretion in that vis-a-vis the other 4 members of the board. So those are the kind of questions I've got for you, Tony, as to how, is there a way that we can establish a protocol? Do we need a protocol? Are we satisfied with the way that we're doing this? Those are my comments.
Satisfaction is in the eye of the board, not me. So when the board tells me that they're not satisfied, we can work on changing the format. I will note that as far as the daylighting process, historically, and I'm talking about maybe 15, 20, 25 years ago, this was not daylighted that well. We went into an off room, and that was the end of the conversation. We have pushed the matter so that the formal adoption of the list is noticed on agenda and is in the main chambers, as occurred this year. So we could refine that further if there's board direction. I will be honest, how often it comes up is rare, and I think I'll take my direction from the board whether or not we need to refine the process. Typically, my experience from the past was when it comes up, it's not generally at that meeting. It's more at a public meeting where there's been a pretty noticed public controversy. But frankly, that's the purpose of that meeting, is to discuss assignments. But I'm open for any suggestions, directions. I don't have any particular recommendations until myself.
Chairman, I do have some comments and some suggestions for future on this. For those who haven't been following the inside baseball of this, Supervisor Euler, who unfortunately is not present today, did ask at the first meeting of the year to have me removed from the TRP Governing Board because he felt that I did not adequately represent the county in a vote specific to the TAU issue. He brought up the county policy, which is that these individuals do serve at the will of the board. I have no disagreement that that's the county policy. I share Supervisor Duran's concern about latitude or having an understanding of how critical an issue is. Supervisor Euler indicated that District 5 had had 2 supervisors removed in the past. He indicated that Supervisor Bloomfield had been removed from the TRP Governing Board. That is not correct. Supervisor Bloomfield, because he was a full-time teacher, chose to step down from the TRPA Governing Board and ask to have someone replaced. So I did want to clarify that record because Supervisor Bloomfield was not replaced. My immediate predecessor, Supervisor Krantz, was replaced after he took the Kings Beach Commercial Core Improvement Project to the TRPA Governing Board in advance of a vote by this board and effectively torpedoed the project by getting a negative vote on the Commercial Core Improvement Project. In comparison with that, the vote that Supervisor Euler was concerned about was a straw poll, so technically not even a binding vote, that was supported by the majority of the TRPA Governing Board to analyze square footage for TA use in the regional plan update in advance of analyzing the regional plan update document and adopting in the future some specific square footage amount. I think there's a pretty clear distinction between taking an actual project and shutting it down versus casting a straw poll vote to analyze a specific question for a future decision. So my suggestion for the future is that if there is a supervisor who has a concern about the way another supervisor has performed on a board, that prior to the first meeting of the year, that supervisor who has the concern sit down with the supervisor they are concerned with, discuss the issue so they have a clear understanding of it, because clearly there was not an understanding of what the issue actually was when it came to our board at the beginning of the year. And then if that supervisor is still concerned and feels that the supervisor who cast the vote with which they did not agree, bring it to the board for discussion. But I think bringing it without notice to the Board of Supervisors at the beginning of the year is both a disservice to the county, a disservice to the community in this case, and frankly a little bit disrespectful to the other supervisor. I certainly would not question the appointment of a supervisor from the western area of Placer County to the, I want to get the name right, the Western Regional Landfill Board, without having first had a discussion with them about why they did or did not cast a vote a specific way. Now, I understand the Brown Act has some implications here, and that sometimes a supervisor can't talk to another supervisor because they've already spoken to someone else. But I just think there are better ways of handling this in the future than this particular appointment removal was handled. I, again, feel very strongly that I was representing the community on that vote. While I respect this board for following their policy decision, I agree with Supervisor Duran that there needs to be a little bit more analysis and latitude in that decision making. And frankly, I think we all owe it to ourselves as board members to understand why other supervisors may or may not cast votes that we don't agree with. And that's really all I have to say on that matter.
I appreciate those comments, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not looking, I mean, maybe we don't need a formal process, but a protocol, to kind of address these types of issues before they do come to, to a head, so to speak.
Mr. Chair, would the board like me to take a shot at writing up some sort of protocol and circulating it and putting it back?
That's actually what I'm trying to from the comments that were made. But Jim, do you have anything to
I
offer?
don't see any need for any change. Any governing body sets the policy, and it's a majority vote of the governing body sets the policy, and if a member doesn't agree with that, it's still incumbent on them to follow the direction of the board. Why have a county policy if whoever represents the county at that position votes against it? And just let the District 5 supervisor make the policy. I don't see any need for any change in the way we do it. Maybe a little bit more transparency. I agree with Supervisor Duran on that regard, but I don't see any need to change any policy. A discussion with the county council with each supervisor when they come into office would probably suffice.
So, just trying to assimilate all the comments were made, Tony. If it's acceptable to everybody, it sounds like if you would take a stab at reducing to writing some protocol suggestions, I think so that the result would be greater transparency, more clarity, Jennifer, as it relates to board policy connected to committee assignments, the particular board member that represents represents the board on that particular committee, and when and if there are circumstances such that there may or may not be difference in policy perspective from a particular supervisor on that committee as compared to the board as a whole, at least we would have a clearer understanding as to what our expectations would be when we have those discussions and how we have those discussions.
And I think it would also allow the supervisor, whoever that may be, it probably won't always be the 5th District Supervisor, though it might be. It will allow that supervisor, whoever they are, to be a little bit more prepared for that initial meeting at the beginning of the year and be able to have the opportunity to lay out why they did or did not differ from supporting the county policy on a vote.
Thanks. That does clarify it. And then, Jack, I think, on the committee assignments, we all have, 15, 20 committee assignments. The culture is simply, I think, to not want to take board time to go over what is an exception type of process. Potentially, most of the time, there's virtually no discussion unless there's a new supervisor. Right. But I think maybe we can package that for public presentation in that regard, so that there's a focus on the board agenda item. Tony, might be something along the lines that these are the presumed committee assignments. Let's have discussion about the exceptions or prospective changes, and I think we could probably figure that one out somehow. And then the whole process would be normal as it relates to the transparency of a regular board meeting. Tony?
I didn't mention it before, but as you know, your board commonly sits as a judicial body hearings. And occasionally some of these committee assignments offer an opportunity like that also for those committees. TRPA would be a very good example where that happens. That's not something you can change somebody's seat over. That's a due process issue to the parties who are litigating before that administrative body. So we're talking about legislative and policy issues as opposed to quasi-judicial hearings. And I can make it much shorter if I don't have to go into the whole history of those separation of those two ideas and those concepts.
I personally like the short approach.
Thought you would.
So if I understand everything, you're going to bring something back for us for consideration in terms of policies, procedures, and we'll consider that at a subsequent meeting.
In no particular timeline right now.
Not that it is.
We don't need to worry about it till next January.
You'll have it before then.
I do want to commend the chairman for putting this agenda item on this meeting's agenda. Time and reflection and additional facts have a tendency to kind of give you a different perspective, and I do appreciate the fact that you put it on for a discussion. Thank you.
Good. Excellent. So our next department item for Community Development Resource Plan. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the item that we just discussed, committee assignments? I see none, so we will then move on to our Community Development Resource Planning TRPA Regional Plan Update. And Paul, Jennifer. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Paul Thompson with Planning Services, along with Jennifer Merchant from the CEO's office. Today, we are providing your board with a status of the TRPA's regional plan update, as well as the county's community plan updates. At this point, there is no board action requested at this time. Just to go into a little bit of background, TRPA continues its efforts in updating its regional plan. As Jennifer and I have previously reported in the past, the regional plan provides an overview of land use, conservation, restoration, forest health, wildlife management, air quality, and related goals, policies, and implementation strategies that, when combined, are designed to accelerate attainment over the next 20 years. In October, your board directed our staff to resubmit additional comments to TRPA regarding the county's position on the regional plan. Those comments were submitted to TRPA's governing board for consideration. In January, the governing board considered these additional comments as well as others on the regional plan and voted to include much of that input in the environmental analysis for the update. They also directed staff to manage a reduced regional plan scope and a more focused project description, and to assemble a team to rescope the update for the preparation of an EIS. The purpose of the reduced scope would allow the regional plan to move forward at a reasonable schedule and budget and address the most immediate concerns facing the TRPA and the Tahoe Basin community. The areas of refocused scope on the regional plan include water quality, land use, transportation, catastrophic threats, air quality, and sustainability. TRPA anticipates the EIS to begin in late spring with the adoption of the regional plan by December 2012. So as far as the background for the county's community plans, Placer County currently maintains 9 community plans within the Tahoe Basin, and as a part of the regional plan update, TRPA is proposing a modified zoning system for the basin. And as a result, and because of the need to maintain consistency with the regional plan and the county's community plans, we are facing the need to update our 9 community plans for the basin. In November of 2010, the county staff drafted a work program and began working on internal discussions on the update process. The staff also met with and has begun working with the redevelopment agency and has been coordinating meetings and outreach with TRPA regarding public outreach format and how the community plan will relate to the regional plan process. Additionally, in an effort to share resources and save on cost, the county staff has met with the TRPA's environmental impact statement consultant for the regional plan and has discussed how the county may use some of their studies in our community plan update. So as far as the current status in the regional plan, since the January governing board meeting, TRPA has continued its meeting with stakeholder groups and government agencies. And as a part of that refocused effort that we talked about, TRPA staff is proposing to front load the regional plan with the update of the Tahoe community plans, thereby allowing both processes to run concurrently. It is TRPA's intention to partner with local governments on the coordinated effort and begin the community plan update process not only with Placer County, but the rest of the agencies in the basin, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that the adoption of the updates be within reasonable time each other, and as mentioned, by the anticipated date of December 2012. So as far as the current status of the county's community plan update, staff has begun identification and mapping of the overall structure of the community plans. As I mentioned, the county currently maintains 9 community plans and general plans within the basins. All of these documents include goals, policies, and as well as zoning, design guidelines, which are largely wrapped up in the same documents. And so with that, in an effort to develop a more cohesive, user-friendly document, staff is proposing to consolidate the 9 community plans into a single overarching community plan policy document with 4 planning areas for which 4 separate zoning ordinances will be developed. We have spoke with TRPA regarding this concept, and they are in concurrence with this approach. So the idea would be to have the goals, policies, and contained in one overarching policy document that would be broad in nature and would apply to all areas within the Placer County portion of the Tahoe Basin. The development of the 4 separate zoning ordinances would contain the reclassified districts or transect districts being brought forward by TRPA, and would also include specific design guidelines for the plan areas. So right now we're thinking about 4 different plan areas, those being West Shore Community Plan, Tahoe City Community Plan, or Plan Area, Carnelian Bay / Tahoe Vista Community Area, Kings Beach, and State Line Community Area. To help identify these boundaries, the staff has been reviewing census tracts, watersheds, PUD boundaries, postal district areas, road networks, and looking at the existing redevelopment boundaries as well as zoning districts and land uses, and is anticipated for each of the 4 planning areas to be finalized late next month. Staff has been working to prepare also a public outreach strategy for the community plan update process, which provides guiding principles in order to ensure that the process reflects participation and feedback from community stakeholders. As part of this strategy, the following teams would be formed: a technical advisory committee, which would advise the county and TRPA staff on technical aspects of the community plan update. There would be a community plan policy study team, and that would provide input on feedback on the overarching community plan policy document. And then there would be 4 separate area study teams to provide input and feedback on the 4 separate zoning ordinance and design guidelines. So as far as next steps, the staff would intends on launching a public outreach for the community plan update in the spring with an information presentation to NITRAC, followed by a town hall meeting that would kick off the community plan update process. After the town hall meeting, staff would solicit, at the town hall meeting, we would solicit community interest in serving on the committees. Regular community plan policies team meetings and TAC meetings would also follow the first town hall meeting. And then at the recommendation of TRPA, staff will be selecting one of the plan areas to be in work on developing the zoning ordinance and design guidelines, and we'll begin regularly scheduled meetings with that team. Meetings on the other 3 plan area study teams will start after the completion of the first zoning ordinance. Regular town hall meetings will be conducted throughout the process, and staff anticipates providing monthly updates to NITRAC as well as to your board as warranted on the progress of the community plan. So as far as the summary, no action is requested as this is an update and is intended to generate discussion and feedback from your board regarding the update process. The staff will continue to participate in the update of the TRPA's regional plan and work on our own community plans as well, and return to your board periodically to request direction. So thank you very much. Jennifer and I are here for any comments.
Comments, board?
I had a couple of clarifying questions on this. So if I understand it, and I did have a discussion with Ray James and Crystal Jacobson, who are working on this. Let me just start by saying it sounds like the county staff that are going to be working on this, you, Paul, Alan Baruch, Ray James, and Crystal Jacobson. Is that correct? Those are kind of the 4 who are directing this, and Edmund Sullivan.
Edmund and
Jennifer Merchant. Okay, sorry.
6 of us.
Crystal didn't give me your name, but I was surprised not to see it. And the idea is to create an overall sort of an umbrella framework that will look at basin-wide concerns like water quality, air quality, transportation, things that really do not vary across communities.
Right.
And then I know that in my discussion with Ray James and Crystal, they had sort of a preliminary map that talked about these 4 different areas. The West Shore community area, I believe, is just the existing West Shore community plan.
It's approximately within the same boundaries.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And then the Tahoe City community area combines what existing areas, do we know?
If I had to, without it being in front of me, it's the Tahoe City community area, it's the Tahoe City general plan area, so the residential portion, as well as going into Lake Forest and up through Dollar Hill, and about that point is where you transition into the Carnegie Bay Tahoe Vista.
So if I can add, it does include the Tahoe City Community Plan Industrial Area as well, which is mostly in the Lake Forest corridor, but also includes some on Highway 89 north outside of Tahoe City.
Okay. Really, frankly, those areas we would sort of mentally consider Tahoe City. And then Carnelian Bay, Tahoe Vista community area, that's then essentially from Dollar Hill to Tahoe Vista?
Immediately past Tahoe Vista to a certain point, and I think we were thinking kind of where that meadow is, somewhere.
The pond.
Yeah, that's where I'm thinking it might transition into Kings Beach.
Okay, and then Kings Beach to State Line, that's pretty clear based on the pond area. If I recall from the recent census data, and there's only about 9,000 people currently residing in this entire area. We've had about a 21% population loss in 10 years in the Placer County portion of the basin. And I apologize, this just occurred to me. For comparison purpose, do we have any idea how many people reside roughly in the North Auburn Bowman Community Plan area?
Not off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to go and get that information for you.
Jim, do you have any idea? Because that's largely your district as well. I mean, but my guess is it's well in excess of 9,000 people living in that area.
Probably, I would say 12,000.
Okay, and it's for those of you who aren't familiar with the North Auburn Bowman area, it covers a very wide range of community types, from freeway intensive commercial right along I-80 to large lot rural ag zone stuff. It covers it all under one sort of larger umbrella with a similar approach to this, which is kind of looking at the different areas by zoning, by use, by essentially by community, and creating some specific design and planning guidelines for those areas. So we have something that exists. This is not a new model that we're creating. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Those are just my clarifying questions for now. I'll be interested in hearing what any of my fellow board members have to say or the audience.
Jim, questions, comments? Jack?
Yeah, I'm a little curious about the selection process for the folks that are going to be on these various committees. Do you have criteria? What if you get an overwhelming number? How are you going to manage that?
As I indicated, we're going to start out with the town hall meeting that we're going to conduct here in the future. And as far as the membership breakdown of who's on what committee, and again, we're still developing this right now, but I think for the technical advisory committee, we were thinking of county staff, special districts, and utilities as being kind of the main makeup of that, and they would advise the county as to specific issues that we're going to be encounter and get advice on direction as well. And then for the community plan policy study team, so this is the team that would help create the overall policy document. We were thinking about business representatives, TRPA representatives, a representative from the environmental community, and as well as the community representative. And what the makeup is there, how many, I don't think we're really set yet. Okay. And then for the 4 separate plan areas, these would be the plan areas that were with the geographic areas. We would have residents that live in the area, business owner, maybe a property owner that owns property that may not have a residence there. And I think we were going to have a total of 5 representatives for that area.
So
and
it
again,
sounds like you got a good cross-section of the community as a whole.
Yeah, the idea is specifically for the plan areas where we're going to have the separate zoning ordinance and design guidelines. Those folks are going to have an idea of what they want their community to look like, and we want to have them to have some input on that.
In fact, we want them to have a great deal of input on what their communities are going to look like. And in the discussion that I had with Ray and Crystal, one of the things we talked about is, okay, so, let's say 100 people want to serve on a committee that's going to be 5 people for each area. How do you choose that? And one of the things we discussed, and we haven't settled on this as a our ultimate choice, but one of the things we discussed is literally putting names in a hat and drawing them so that there's no bias as to picking and choosing individual committee members, but making it a purely random process so everyone has the exact same opportunity, the exact same statistical chance to be part of that decision-making process. I'm kind of tending toward that idea myself. It's certainly something we could do at a community meeting so that there's no question of, fiddling with names or applications. And I just think that's probably the best, most transparent way to make this process happen.
Is there anyone from the public who'd like to ask questions or comment on this item?
Good morning, Ellie Waller, Tahoe Vista resident. I do have several questions. You stated that you have concurrence from the TRPA on the direction you are taking. Why wasn't the concept of one overarching plan, which I agree is good with the 4 subzones vetted before this board first, before going to the TRPA? Will plan area statements remain intact, be modified or completely eliminated with the new transect overlays? And I feel that the TRPA and all local jurisdictions, not just Placer County, have not done an adequate job of public outreach to explain transect zoning and how it'll affect the communities. I think Kings Beach should be a standalone zone. I think there's a majority of the community up there, and they will come out, I'm sure, in full force, that think Crystal Bay is very different than Kings Beach and should be aligned with Brockway as a separate one, and Kings Beach as a standalone. And there might be some confusion with your dividing line with Tahoe Vista and Kings Beach from an assessor's, realtor's, and postal standpoint. We need to get some clarification on that. People that live behind the Brockway Golf Course call themselves Tahoe Vista. The assessor's office doesn't do a really good job of the deeds, and they get them changed, so the realtors have problems there. Right now, the Postal Service is using 267 as a dividing line for postal routes. We're unfortunately increasing rates, so we need to be able to determine, is Safeway Kings Beach or is Safeway Tahoe Vista for postal rates. I hate to bring that up. Let's see. The packet states you will finalize the planning areas in May. As this is Tahoe specific, will you be bringing this back to the July board here in Tahoe, or will this be an Auburn meeting? And could you release a timeline, to the best of your knowledge, of upcoming presentations that show the NITRAC, the Board of Supervisors, so people can kind of align their lives to attend these meetings? And who are the stakeholders currently being consulted, and how were they selected before the process got started? And I look forward to participating in future meetings. Thank you.
I think one comment's for sure, unless there's comments to the contrary from staff, that we will plan any consideration of those community plan updates for our meetings up here. That's customary and policy for us, so make a point of trying to do that. And I don't
absolutely be coming to NITRAC.
Right. Anyone else from the public? See none, we'll close this item, and thank you all, and thanks for the update. Let's take up our item B, which is tourist accommodation units, TRPA. And Michael, are you going to present that? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Johnson with the Community Development Resource Agency. In response to a proposal by the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency to possibly restrict and limit the size of tourist accommodation units in the Basin, and based upon direction from your board, staff has prepared this analysis to provide an overview of the tourist accommodation units in Tahoe. As highlighted in this presentation, staff has found that there are existing rules and regulations that limit the size of tourist accommodation units, and because of these limitations, there are sufficient safeguards in place to address the concerns that TRPA and the community have expressed regarding TAUs. The concept of a tourist accommodation unit was created by TRPA as part of its 1987 regional plan. Based upon language in TRPA's Code of Ordinances, TAUs are defined as one bedroom or a group of 2 or more rooms with a bedroom, with or without cooking facilities, primarily designed to be rented by the day or week or occupied on a temporary basis. Currently, there are no size limitations, either with a minimum or a maximum, on TAUs. Examples of TAUs include bed and breakfast units, hotel and motel units, and timeshare units, with or without kitchens. TAUs are currently permitted in a variety of zoning districts throughout the basin. It should be noted that where where timeshare units are required, a conditional use permit is required, and because of that, there is a public hearing process and an environmental analysis that goes along with that recommendation to either the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors. As the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency continues to move forward with its regional plan update, the governing board recently approved a range of alternatives related to TAUs that are to be considered in the environmental document that is being prepared for the regional plan update. The alternatives identified by the governing board include a range of unit sizes and mixes for TAUs, including with and without kitchens. As proposed by TRPA, the purpose of these alternatives is to control the size of TAU units. As further detailed in this presentation, county staff believes that TRPA's concerns with the transit or tourist accommodation units are misplaced, and that there are sufficient existing checks and balances in place to control and regulate the size of tourist accommodation units. As identified in the staff report that was presented to you, there are a number of factors that effectively limit the size and development within the basin, making the proposed size and limitations for tourist accommodation units unnecessary. Factors such as density, height limitations, coverage, and market demand already place limitations on development projects in the basin. So regardless of their size, there are these existing limitations and restrictions in place. Within the basin, the maximum density that can be achieved is 15 units per acre. However, because of height restrictions, lot coverage requirements, staff has concluded that most projects are approved at the 7 to 10 unit per acre density range. Regarding height, the maximum height limits within the basin are 24 to 36 feet, depending upon the pitch of the roof. With that height limitation, the maximum number of stories you can achieve is 3 stories, although most of the structures that have been built within the basin are 2 stories in height. The single most restrictive requirement within the basin is lot coverage. Currently, the maximum lot coverage that can be achieved is 30%, and this would take into account any parking areas, walkways, refuse containers, and the footprints of the buildings. So when you start looking at lot coverage, the ability to have large, dense developments is very limited within the basin. Currently, TRPA staff is considering the position that there should be a hard and fast maximum square footage placed on TAUs. In contrast, county staff's analysis has shown that implementing the existing design standards puts sufficient limitations in place that regulates the size of units within the basin. A concern that has been raised is that larger units generate more trips in the basin, and controlling traffic is one of the primary goals of TRPA. The nationally recognized Institute of Transportation Engineers manual illustrates that trips generated by residential projects can range from less than 6 trips per day for condominium units to 9 trips per day for hotel motel projects, and up to 10 trips per day for a timeshare type unit. What's important to note is regardless if it's a 1-bedroom unit, a 2-bedroom unit, or a 3-bedroom unit, the larger size units do not generate more trips per day than the smaller units. So in conclusion, while there is a concern with larger units within the basin, staff's analysis has found that there are existing regulations in place that control and limit the density of projects, and through this limitation, regardless of the size of the project, development is able to be controlled in a manner consistent with the existing Code of Ordinances for TRPA as well as the county's zoning ordinance and general plan requirements for the Tahoe Basin. That concludes staff's analysis. We are available to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, Michael, I do have a question, and it's more with regards to the data. I would like to know whether or not, it's a question of use for me. Is the use the same as it would be for 250 square feet moving to 3,000? And I think that kind of dovetails with the question with regards to transportation and the number of trips generated by it. So my question is what is the difference in the use? Is the use the same or the similar between 250 to 3,000? Are they using the same amount of toilet flushes, the same amount of water, the same amount of waste? What's the distinction here?
The use is the same. It's a residential type use. And on a square foot basis, the larger units do not generate any more impacts, be it wastewater or traffic or the use of water, than do the smaller units. Proportionally, the square footage requirements, whether it's a smaller unit or larger unit, proportionally, the use is the same.
So is it just that the demand commercially is now for a bigger unit as opposed to years ago a smaller unit? Is that what we're...
Staff's analysis is finding that, yes, there is a demand for the larger units. And that's why you see a range and mix of units, whether they're 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or 3 or more bedrooms being created. It's to address the demand that's out there. Okay. And the demand is constantly in flux, and that's staff's biggest concern. As the regional plan moves forward, and it's intended to be implemented for a 20-year time frame, from the county staff's perspective, we believe it's best to have as much flexibility as possible, not knowing what the conditions or requirements will be 20 years into the future.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I had a few questions. You said the demand is the same proportionally. I stayed in a room last night that was about 400 square feet, had 2 queen-size beds. So my take on that room is, at a maximum, you're going to get 4 people in there, 2 parents, 2 kids, or 2 couples. At a maximum, you're going to have 2 cars associated with that 400 square foot TAU. That's a TAU. Now, we're in Northstar, so that can't be moved into the Basin, is my understanding. But let's just say that room was in the Basin. Isn't it correct that that 400 square foot TAU that sleeps a maximum of 4 people, and for which we would assume a maximum of 2 cars, which did have a microwave and a refrigerator, isn't it correct that that TAU can be morphed into an almost 4,000 square foot TAU in the Tahoe Basin, such as Tonopolo or Harborside Villas, where there are 3 and 4 bedrooms and a bonus game room?
At this time, yes, that is possible.
And you're telling me that there's no greater impact for a 4-bedroom plus a bonus room, which we know people are putting beds in, where there's 4 cars, 5 cars, not many more people?
Based upon the analysis from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, it was concluded that regardless of the size of the unit, the daily trips are still the same, whether it's a smaller unit or a larger unit.
If I could point out one thing also, each project is analyzed on the merits of the project environmentally, and it includes analysis on traffic as well as sewage flows and water quality impacts and all of the impacts that would be analyzed for any size of project. In the example, Jennifer, I think that you provided, you could fit more people, obviously, in a 3-bedroom unit than you can in a 1-bedroom unit. You could maybe put 6 people in there or 8 people, depending on how the bedrooms were configured. But because you've got a 3,000 square foot unit, you have 1 TAU. If you had that same number of bedrooms in smaller units, you'd be using more TAUs. So it's all very relative and within the context of the project that everything is analyzed on an individual basis, which is why we felt that putting an arbitrary square foot number on there was not the correct thing to do, that it was more proper to analyze each project on its own merits.
And I don't disagree with analyzing each project on its own merits, but I think you've really put your finger on the issue for the community, which is that 300 square foot hotel room took one TAU to turn into an over 3,000 square foot multi-bedroom facility. And the community's perspective, which when I voted on this with, frankly, the majority of the TRPA governing board, including the most pro-development people on that board, the community concern with this is that you are taking one small TAU and turning into one giant TAU. And the community concern is, does that make sense? Or does it make more sense to say, maybe we should have limits to this? One of the issues that's raised in the report is there are currently no size limitations on these, either maximum or minimum. And frankly, the development community supported putting some sideboards on this because they saw the concern that, say someday you get some really, really anti-development TRPA governing board who says, you know what, now we're going to decide that a 300 square foot TAU can only be 100 square feet. Now, that's pretty far out there. That's probably never going to happen. But that exists as a possibility under what the TRPA has today for TAUs. And so the consensus of the TRPA governing board, as I say, including the most pro-development people on that board, was that it made sense to implement some guidelines. Interestingly, Placer County strangely finds itself allied with the environmental community in opposing these guidelines. The three governing board members who voted against looking at some kind of size limitation were Stephen Merrill, Byron Scher, and Mara Bresnick, who are considered sort of the conservation community members of the TRPA governing board. So this issue certainly makes for strange bedfellows as it relates to Placer County. Having said that, I think it is important that we recognize that while Placer County takes a position, and you and I have discussed this on numerous occasions, that this is analyzed in each project and we run through it, the perception in the community is that this is a problem. And they point to Tonopalo and they point to Harborside Villas. And although this report says, oh, we're not doing stuff on that kind of model right now because it's, the economies aren't directing that, there is nothing currently that says when the economy changes that we don't have those same sorts of projects again that the communities weighed in on very strongly in opposition to, and their voices weren't heard. So I think it's just very important to put some kind of sideboards on this. I would not change my vote at the TRPA. I would still vote in favor of creating some sort of sideboards for the TAUs. They ranged from ludicrously small. I believe the conservation community wanted them at 550 square feet, which I think is completely ridiculous. I think the upper end that was identified without bonus, mind you, was 2,100 square feet, and so that can actually get substantially larger given the TRPA's bonus opportunities for height and density and all of that. But Placer County's position is kind of out on the fringe on this, and while I understand your arguments, the community perception is that this is a problem, and the best way to solve the issue is to create and agree to some sideboards. And I think that's what the TRPA was trying to do because they realized this is a hot button issue. And I think the best way to put it to rest is to get some kind of consensus and agreement on what those sideboards should be. So while I respect your report and what's in here, would not change my vote at the TRPA, would still vote to look at sideboards for the TAUs. So thank you.
Comments? Is there anyone from the public who'd like to address this issue?
Good morning again, board members. Ellie Waller, Friends of Tahoe Vista. Today I'm here to discuss the controversial the tourist accommodation units. I was a member of the TRPA task force with Jennifer Merchant. We did not achieve any real consensus out of the meeting, but the TRPA did come forward with some good range of alternatives. Why would the county want to confuse the system by not agreeing with the TRPA proposed policy and the preferred alternative? Limiting the size of a unit and averaging the TAU is clear. I do not agree with the size of the TAU or unit as it will be defined should be 1,200 square feet. And I do not agree with what is in the December 8th package in your packet. The Alternative for Conservation group asked for 550 square feet, period, 1 bedroom per TAU. I will be asking the TRPA to correct that in the environmental document. The current policies need clarification, but not additional TAUs added to the inventory. As stated in your packet, the TRPA created the concept of a TAU in 1987, which suggested these commodities were created to establish a cap on the number of tourist accommodation units in the basin and encourage the redevelopment of existing units. Some of the confusion here is the word commodity. Jennifer touched upon that. When you purchase one TAU and turn it into 3,000 square feet, the developer does benefit financially. TAUs may be out of whack for price. I don't think there's any issues with inventory. Let's see. I'll make sure I cover all the good things here. What this doesn't state is the type of unit of use. More detail and specificity is needed to better clarify the difference between the original use. A hotel room, motel room, or small cabin, which is now being redeveloped into a timeshare product. As stated in the packet, under the category of density, timeshares are limited to 15 units per acre when combined with development constraints of height, setbacks, etc. The statement captures itself should be revisited that 15 units per acre was intended for hotels and bed and breakfast, not residential large TAUs like Tonapalo. That only has 19 units. I think fewer units per acre could be explored when we get into community plan update specifics. The hypothetical example used in the staff summary is not feasible or practical. Timeshare developments being proposed today are on 5 or more acres, not 20,000 square feet, which allow for these larger developments. Using bad development like Brockway Tower and Calneva as existing characters should not be acknowledged. The TRPA wants to correct the mistakes of the past. I will turn this in. I just want to, let's see, there's 2 studies. There is a parking study that I would like the county to review. I got from Gordon Shaw. Let me see where the title of that. I can leave that with Jennifer. That states additional parking should be required for larger units. The last county code and their table 1 shows less than 2 parking places for a larger unit, and this study brings evidence forward that you need more parking. And also the the implementation strategies of redevelopment of Kings Beach and Tahoe City dated May 14th, prepared by the Economic and Planning Systems, was given to the redevelopment agency. They talk about issues there, and I think that should be revisited. And I will close with the TRPA governing board members recognized and approved a range of alternatives as part of the regional plan update. And I believe that Placer County should do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to address this issue?
Good morning. My name is Scott Teach. I'm a business and property owner in Placer County in the Brockway area. I just want to make some comments about the TAUs, the fact that this board apparently doesn't think that there's a problem with these old hotels morphing from 300 square feet to whatever the developer sees fit. I know we hear all the time that in the 60s we lost the opportunity for the Lake Tahoe Basin to be a national park, but I don't think that means that it should be a strip mine. I really think that the county government should appreciate what we have at Lake Tahoe and not just consider it a revenue stream. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to address this item? Seeing none, thank you for your comments, and we will move on to our 10 o'clock timed item, facility services. We're going to flip the sequence a bit. We're going to consider the garbage collection fee adjustments, item B, first, and then consider the corresponding contract for, I think, obvious reasons. So, Jim, we'll start out with item B first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you making the adjustment to the agenda that way. We apologize for having it in the wrong order. My first recommendation for you this morning is that you conduct a public hearing to receive input on the proposed garbage collection fee adjustments for franchise areas 2 and 3. For definition, Area 2 is from Donner Summit West, Area 3 is the Tahoe Basin, and the surrounding areas, Martis Valley and so forth. We are also asking that you adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign an amendment that incorporates the new fees, and that you make a finding pursuant to the Public Resources Code that the collection fees are derived directly from the cost of providing service and are necessary to meet the operating expenses required for maintenance of service and are therefore exempt from environmental review. By way of brief background, Tahoe Truckee Sierra Disposal is the franchised garbage collection company for this area, for these 2 franchise areas, and they collect fees from the public, from their customers, for that service. Those fees are comprised of 3 different components, and I'll briefly go through those. There's a service component, which actually covers TTSD's costs for going out and collecting the garbage, their fuel, their trucks, their labor, and so forth. There's a tipping fee that they have to pay at the Eastern Regional Landfill in MRF. That pays for processing the waste at the MRF, removing the recyclables, and then transporting the residue from that process to Lockwood, Nevada for disposal. It also covers the cost of disposal at Lockwood. And then they also have to pay the county a 4% franchise fee, so 4% of the money that they collect they have to pay to the county. Your board over the past several years has taken a number of steps to reduce the impacts of cost increases, particularly during the recession since 2008. You've reduced the franchise fee from 5% to 4%, and for a couple of years you have actually absorbed cost increases that are associated with the processing into the county's portion of that processing fee. So we actually receive less of the processing fee than we used to, less of the tipping fee than we used to. We've used that to offset some cost increases. So your board has taken a number of actions over the last several years that have reduced impacts of cost increases. Unfortunately, we're at a point in time where we have limited ability to do that. Although you will see in the next item that we are recommending that you continue to absorb some cost increases on the MRF processing side, we're unable to offset those enough to avoid having to recommend a collection fee increase. Now, of those 3 components that I talked about, the increase that we're here to talk about today in this public hearing is to the service component of the fee. Per their contract for collection, Tahoe Truckee Sierra Disposal is they actually our contract requires us to give them a COLA based on a computation of several different indices that actually represent the cost of fuel, the cost of the industrial type of equipment that they use, and so forth. And that particular increase this year calculates to 3.52%. That would only be applied to the service component of that fee, not to the other components that I discussed. And what it results in is some moderate increases to the actual fees that they will charge for collection. There's a large table of those fees. There are dozens and dozens of collection services that they provide. But as examples, a single can service in Area 2 would increase from $20.48 a month up to $21.03 a month. So about a 55-cent increase in that particular service. A single can service in Area 3 would increase from $17.87 a month up to $18.32 a month. So we're talking about roughly on a monthly service about a 50% increase would be the average. There are I'm sorry, a 50-cent. Thank you for that clarification.
And
Thank you for that
specifically about a 2.7 to 1% increase range. Is
Correct.
that correct? Thank
you. If your math is correct, I agree with you, Supervisor. In any event, staff and your board over the years have tried really hard to keep these fee increases as moderate as we can, especially since the recession started. We appreciate how difficult it is to do increases during these times. Unfortunately, we're at a point where we simply don't have the ability to absorb increases the way we have in the past. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have. This is a public hearing. I would recommend that you conduct a public hearing. I did not mention, and I apologize, I did not mention, we've done noticing pursuant to the government code requirements. We sent out approximately 15,000 notices to the customers that this hearing was to take place and that we were recommending the increases. My most recent information, and I believe Ann probably has the final numbers, my most recent information was that we had about 140 letters. 142 letters in opposition. We also had about 300 of the 15,000 notices that we sent out that were returned undeliverable. So that reports on the noticing process that we undertook. So with that, I would recommend that your board conduct a public hearing, and we do recommend that you adopt the increases.
Thanks. Sure.
And just to make a public record, on page 8, in the third paragraph, with regards to franchise area 3, the notice was sent out 45 days in advance, consistent with the requirements of Proposition 218, and I assume of those 142 where some of those people were responding.
Correct. The vast majority of the responses that we got were from Area 3.
Okay, before we open up the public hearing, are there any questions, comments from board members?
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify a couple of things, Jim. So there's no disposal adjustment, correct?
The fee that they pay at Lockwood, Nevada did go up. In the next item that I'm going to present to your board, we are recommending that we absorb that increase, that we not pass that on to the customers.
And the existing special fee is 4% is sufficient?
Correct.
Okay, so the service component is 3.52%. You have 3 items here that permit, I guess, uses guidelines for any type of an increase. So is it a combination of all 3, or is it just changes in disposal costs for the service component?
It's just changes in the service component costs, and it's purely based on a formula that compares, I believe it's 3 different indices that represent the cost that the contractor sees, and we apply that only to the service component of the fee. So we take that, we calculate that adjustment, and we apply it only to that service component. The reason that you see minor differences between the service levels is that the greater the amount of disposal there is in a particular service, the smaller the service component is. It takes the same amount of time to go pick up a 3-yard bin and dump it into the truck as it does a 32-gallon can. So the smaller services do have a greater service component. Therefore, you see a little bit of a difference. So the more tonnage there is, conversely, if the cost of disposal had gone up more than the service component, you'd see a disparity the other direction.
Okay, no, I appreciate that clarification on the methodology there. I was a little bit, thanks.
Questions or comments? Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'll open up the public hearing for anyone from the public who'd like to address the board. Please come forward and state your name.
Good morning, board members. My name is Brent Collinson. I don't necessarily have any position on the increase in the fee. My concern is about the service levels that are provided. We live on a cul-de-sac where the garbage truck, the large garbage truck, parks. They bring the larger dumpsters in, tip it back into the truck. When they do that, especially if it's windy, a lot of our neighbors' garbage gets spread around in our cul-de-sac. So we get to go around and pick up the paper and the plastic and things like that. Of a greater concern is there's also nails and broken glass that's in the cul-de-sac. We've called the TTSD and asked them to do something about it. One time they did send by a street sweeper, which the neighbor said was from the town of Truckee, so I'm sure we want to thank the taxpayers of the town of Truckee for sending that by. But they just did one sweep, and that area was clean, but the rest of it wasn't. I talked to the individual people there, and they say, oh, yeah, we'll take care of it. And they do get out a broom and do a little bit of sweeping, but there's still lots of garbage and refuse there, especially the broken glass and nails. If we hadn't had so many snowplows cleaning the street, I would have brought in a sample for you, but if you have this hearing sometime in the summer, I could show you what we picked up. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate hearing that, and if you'll talk to me after I get back down, I will be very happy to have a discussion with TTSD about this.
Actually, I was hoping to go back to work, so I'll give you my card if you
That'd
don't
be
mind
fantastic.
calling me. Okay.
Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to address the board? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for action. We have items B, 1, 2, and 3, the
Robert, I'd like to make a few comments, and then just, we'll, following those comments, make a motion to approve. We were contacted by about 142 people in opposition to this. Many of them indicated that they thought it would be cheaper to actually drive their vehicles to the dump. I actually ran some analysis on that, and indeed, it's actually a really good deal for us to have our garbage picked up weekly by the garbage companies. Some of the concerns relate specifically to Area 3, which is the Tahoe Basin, which is that there is mandatory garbage collection in the basin, and many of the second homeowners felt that it was unfair to them to be required to have garbage pickup when they aren't here every weekend, and that therefore they pay a proportionally larger amount than a full-time resident for the amount of garbage they produce. I have had a second home in other areas where that was a required service, and unfortunately it's just part of the cost of doing business as a second homeowner. A number of the letters indicated that they were seniors and that they couldn't afford an increase. One thing I'm going to follow up on those letters is the people who specifically identified themselves as seniors and make sure that they are taking advantage of the senior rate, which the garbage company does offer. I have the feeling many people don't know that's available. And then last is that, or two points, the price of gasoline, which is largely what this increase is based upon, has gone up over 30% in the last year alone. And that's just an unsustainable cost for the garbage company to come collect our garbage and dispose of it. And it's a sad reality, but it's true. It costs us all more, but it also costs the garbage company more, and they need to cover those costs if we want them to continue providing the service to us. A number of people thought 3.5%, which again was 45 cents roughly in Area 3 and 55 cents a month in Area 2, was just an amount of money that they couldn't absorb. I drove around my neighborhood where it would go up 55 cents because I live in Area 2, and noticed that there were a lot of residences that left a single light bulb burning outside their homes 24 hours a day, 60-watt bulb, and just ran some figures to see what it cost them on a monthly basis. It costs about $5.30 a month to leave a single 60-watt bulb running on in your home or outside your home. And so, my suggestion for the folks who, felt that 55 cents a month was just too much to absorb was that they turn a light off. There are some costs to be saved, and I think we get terrific service from our garbage company. I do agree with Mr. Collinson that they could do a little bit better about making sure it doesn't end up strewn around our streets. One thing I think they need to do is cover their dumpsters before they start driving at high speed, because a lot of it does end up in the streets. But I am going to move that we adopt these increases, and we adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign an amendment that incorporates the new fees, and that we make a finding pursuant to Section 21080B8 of the Public Resources Code that the collection fees are derived directly from the cost of providing services and are necessary to meet operating expenses required for maintenance of service and are therefore exempt from environmental review.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the authorizing resolution for the fee increases and the appropriate findings. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will jump to item 1A, which is the resulting contract amendment with regards to Tahoe, Truckee Disposal, and Eastern Regional Landfill, Inc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is actually an adjustment to the tipping fee that we discussed previously. Had your board not approved the collection fee increases, I would have wanted to come back to your board with a different approach to this particular item, which is why I wanted to change the order of items. Again, Tahoe, Truckee, Sierra Disposal, and Eastern Regional, Inc. operate our MRF and then handle the disposal part of our processing. This particular fee is the fee that we charge at the gate of the MRF. It's currently, I'll find my numbers here, it's currently at $77. I don't have my notes in front of me, I apologize. What's happened, again, the service component of this particular fee is increasing by 3.52%, which is $1.36 a ton. However, rather than recommend that your board increase the tipping fee that's charged at the gate to the customers, we are recommending that we further redistribute the sharing of costs within the existing fee, reducing the amount of money that the county keeps for its portion of the operations and for putting away reserves for ongoing capital costs. We've analyzed those funds. The fund is actually quite well funded right at this point in time. We don't project any need beyond what is projected for the fees. We do use the fees for capital projects at the site. We are intending in the future to purchase the buildings and so forth that TTD ERL Inc. owns, but we're on track. We're collecting money at an appropriate rate in order to do that. This would have an approximately $110,000 impact to our ability to put money into reserves this particular year. That fits into our planning well, and we recommend that your board take this action to redistribute the distribution of the fee that we do collect in order not to increase the tipping fee that's charged both to the public and to TDD when they come in the door. So I hope that wasn't too convoluted for you. I hope that all made sense. I'd be happy to try to straighten it out and answer questions for you if there's a need. But we would recommend that we leave the fee where it is and simply redistribute that $1.36.
So we're not increasing.
We are not increasing the fee. We're decreasing the amount of it.
Just to clarify, that decrease is $110,000.
Our projected estimate based on the tonnages that we expect would be that it would be about $110,000, yes.
Thank you.
I move we adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign the 11th Amendment to the to the Agreement for Solid Waste Handling Services with Tahoe Truckee Disposal and Eastern Regional Landfill to increase processing fees paid to the contractor.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the 11th Amendment just described. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to address us? Seeing none, bring it back for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Jim. We'll move to our 10:15 timed item, Community Development Resource Planning Proposed Ordinance temporarily allowing prohibited signs. And Paul's going to take this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, Paul Thompson again from Planning Services. This item begins on page 19 of your board agenda packet. This item before your board is a request to adopt an ordinance that would allow the placement of certain signs that are currently prohibited by the Placer County zoning ordinance for a one-year period. The proposed ordinance is being requested in order to provide Placer County businesses with the ability to potentially draw in a larger customer base in an effort to ease the burden of the economic downturn, while also establishing limits on the number, size, and location of the signs in order to ensure that there is no public safety issues and limited aesthetic consequences. During the 2010 business walks, the business owners consistently shared their concerns regarding the limitations on sign restrictions placed and their ability to reach potential customers. After hearing these concerns and with direction from board members, staff moved forward with an ordinance to allow for the temporary relaxation of certain requirements, sign requirements to assist business community within Placer County. Our sign ordinance currently prohibits a number of different signs, and those are signs like A-frame signs, animated signs, banners, off-premise signs, portable signs, and this ordinance would allow for the temporary placement of some of these prohibited signs for a one-year period. Those being A-frame signs, inflated, lighter than air signs, and portable signs. In addition, the ordinance would also suspend the maximum allowable time frame for exempt signs, and these are signs that are typically the temporary sales and event signs which currently are limited for a 45-day period in one calendar year, as well as window signs, which are currently limited for 60 days within a calendar year. So with this ordinance, the placement of these type of signs would be without limit for a one-year period. Signs permitted with this ordinance may not interfere with driver sight distance and may not obstruct any passive travel along sidewalks. This sign ordinance, this ordinance would not apply to the Tahoe Basin or Squaw Valley because the signage in those areas are governed by other adopted county ordinances and requirements. The proposed ordinance was presented to the Planning Commission on February 23rd. At the hearing, the Commission considered reports from the staff and received testimony from one member of the public and adopted a motion to recommend approval of the ordinance with a recommendation that a more specific language be brought forward as to the size and number of the signs permitted. Based on the Planning Commission's recommendation, additional requirements were added to the number of signs and location and size. And as an example, excuse me, the ordinance specifies that each business would be permitted one of these type of signs, prohibited signs, and that the sign shall not be located within any road easements or accessible path of travel. Additionally, the ordinance sets forth specific size requirements for the different types of signs, including height limits, and allowable sign area. So with that, the Planning Services Division recommends that your board find that this action is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to Section 15.311, which is relating to accessory structures, and approve the attached ordinance allowing for the temporary placement of prohibited signs and the modification to the time limits for temporary signs and window signs. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions, board members? Jennifer?
I would encourage this board to actually delay taking action on this. This will not apply in the Tahoe Basin. It will not apply in Squaw Valley. I'm wondering why we're acting on it on this board meeting, on this agenda. I think it would be more appropriate to hear this item on the west side of the county in Auburn, where people who will potentially be impacted by this will have a better opportunity to come and make their voices heard. So I would suggest that we defer this item to a later date in a more appropriate venue to hear it.
It's scheduled for this particular meeting is that there was a series of business walks that were conducted last spring through early summer, and there are many folks from the chambers who participate, as well as county staff, economic development, members of some board staff too, and went out and did the outreach to the businesses. And this is one area that the businesses pointed out they could use some assistance, especially in the recession. The reason why it was scheduled for this meeting was simply to try and get it adopted sooner. There is a first and second reading required of the ordinance. Delay till May, which we had looked at, would be another 3 weeks, meaning the ordinance would be delayed another 3 weeks beyond that. So trying to provide as much emergency relief to the businesses was the reason why it was brought to this meeting. I believe the testimony at the Planning Commission, a publicly noticed meeting, very few people showed up for that. It was a grassroots kind of proposal that came forward, and again, that's why it's scheduled at this particular meeting, but clearly it's within your board's decision to push it to the May 3rd meeting.
I've got a couple of questions. The first one, and I'm all for trying to find ways to increase commerce. Was there any data provided during these walks, or did we do any number crunching to see that there may be a possibility of getting from point A to point B with this particular ordinance?
The only information that I have is that from the business walks, that it seemed to be a consistent theme that the sign regulations that the county has were pretty rigorous, and that they need this help to hopefully promote their businesses.
Sure. The second question is with regards to the sunset provisions. I'm assuming that when this does sunset, there's either going to be an ordinance or it's going to come back to the board for further approval or an extension, what have you.
Yes, there is a sunset provision, and that is in the proposed ordinance. That begins on, I believe, let's see here, that's on page 22.
This is adopted.
And if you look at the bottom of page, actually the bottom, page 25, it does have a one-year time frame, and it would automatically sunset within that one-year time frame. There would be no reason to come back to the board.
Okay.
Unless your board wanted that to happen.
And is there a way, to quantify, and take a look back at what has happened to see whether or not there was, it was successful?
Sure. We can somehow track. I'm not sure how exactly we would do that. Maybe through some mailers, that sort. Maybe the next year, if we have a business walk next year, maybe that could be a question that is specifically asked. I think that begins sometime in the fall.
Okay. And my final question is, what have other jurisdictions relaxed their sign ordinance?
They have.
Similarly? And what jurisdictions were those?
I believe we did some research, and Rockland had a relaxation. I had just heard that Auburn also had some relaxation too. And then, as a part of this process, I did get a call from the city of Roseville wanting a copy of the staff report. So, and I did speak with a member over there, and I think they're proposing the same thing.
Great. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And we do have a member of the Roosevelt Chamber of Commerce who's here to speak to this item.
Mr. Chair, I have no problem moving forward on this. I've talked to a lot of business owners, and I've been involved with particularly the Auburn Area Chamber of Commerce, and they support this wholeheartedly. Again, and I'm sure we'll have another business walk, as you suggested, this later on this year, and then we can get feedback from those that have comments on it. So I suggest that we move forward on this.
So we have a motion and a second, but this is a public hearing, so, and since Wendy drove all the way up here from, well, it was probably a beautiful spring day down below all that. Come on up, Brent.
Good morning, Wendy Gehrig, CEO of the Roosevelt Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here representing the Roosevelt Chamber that serves both Roseville and Granite Bay. I probably would be speaking out of line if I said I'm here also representing the other chambers in South Placer, but I'm going to take that risk and say that because I believe that they too would be very supportive of the Board of Supervisors moving forward this morning on this action. I had some comments here, and then based on some of the questions, just wanted to share a couple of thoughts from the business walks. The Roseville Chamber has done our walks for the last 2 years, and there was nothing more embarrassing than going. We started in 2009, and what we heard loud and clear in both Roseville, but you're concerned with Granite Bay, was the sign ordinance is a barrier for business. And it's interesting, I don't know if that's a perception or a reality, but for these business owners, it's a reality. And in tough economic times, they need all the help that they can get in order to generate business. So it was embarrassing to go back on the second year for the business walk to not be able to tell them we did anything with the concerns expressed the first year, because we heard, again, a little bit louder that the sign ordinance is an issue in Roseville and in the county. And I think that we heard that our friends in the city of Rockland and in the city of Auburn are moving forward with a change to their ordinance. And I made the comment at our last Chamber's Economic and Government Relations Committee meeting that the Board of Supervisors would be having an item to relax their sign ordinance on their agenda for the April meeting. And based on that outcome, I would be addressing the city of Roseville and asking them to do the same thing. So I'm glad they listened to that as well and are not waiting for me to contact them. But again, I would encourage you to move forward because, again, it is the business owner's perception that anything that they can do to promote business via signage on a longer term basis will help them. The Chamber in Roseville, and again, I'll speak for the South Placer Chambers, are committed to helping you get the word out, because there's no sense in passing this ordinance and then not telling anybody about it. So we do have on May 6th, I believe it's a joint meeting with the Roseville, Rockland, Lincoln, and Auburn Chambers, and perhaps the county exec will be able to attend, or some of our supervisors, to share with the crowd that's in attendance that this action has been taken by the board, and to get the word out to our own respective business communities that you indeed have listened to the concerns expressed. And I want to not belabor this, but again, just thank the planning staff and the board of supervisors for listening to the input from your business community. And I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for coming up. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to address this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Jennifer?
Yeah, I do have a couple of comments on this. I still am uncomfortable adopting this on this end of the district. I really think the more appropriate venue is the west end of the district. Wendy used a really interesting word, which is perception, which relates to one of our earlier discussions about TAUs. And whether a perception or a reality is the case, perception matters, particularly when it's the perception of the community we're representing. So since this does not apply to the Tahoe Basin, and it does not apply to Squaw Valley, and it is the perception of the community on the west side of the district that this is a problem, just as it was the perception of the community up here that the TAU issue was a problem, I'm willing to move forward on this and vote in support of relaxing the sign regulations as they exist. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Perception does matter.
A motion and a second, I recall, I think. So all those in favor of the changes in the sign ordinance as per the staff recommendation for temporary adjustments, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. We will now take up our next department item 5, which is North Lake Tahoe Resort Association First Amendment to the 2010-11 Resort Association contract. Jennifer?
Good morning again, Chairman Wygant, members of the board, Jennifer Merchant, the Executive Office here at Tahoe. The item before you is an amendment to the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association agreement. The amendment to this fiscal year 2010-2011 agreement with the Resort Association before your consideration today reflects two fundamental changes to the original agreement approved by your board in October. First, the amended agreement would allocate an additional $914,794 in transient occupancy tax funds from fiscal year 08-09 and 09-10 fund balance for the promotion of tourism and visitor-serving capital projects. This agreement also releases about $700,000 in current fiscal year infrastructure account revenues that were frozen by agreement in October, placed in reserves in case further state budget cuts necessitated allocation in order to maintain basic essential tourist-related Tahoe services, such as county-provided snow removal and transit operations. These assets will now be released to the infrastructure account held in the county treasury, where they can later be allocated for capital projects in the Tahoe area following Resort Association recommendation and your board's approval. In order to provide the services identified in the amended scope of work and as allocated in the budget, this amended agreement calls for the allocation of the fund balance of the following to the following resource categories: $199,755 for marketing, $715,039 for capital improvements. And as outlined in the scope of work, the marketing funds will be used to bolster marketing support for the Amgen Tour of California bike race that you heard about yesterday, as well as other special event and target market development. And as referenced earlier, funds allocated to the county's infrastructure fund account will not be allocated until a specific project is brought forth and recommended by the Resort Association and approved by your board. At this time, I can answer any questions, and Ron Trevis is in the audience, also the interim executive director of the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association. He can answer questions as well.
Are there any questions? It doesn't matter.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add, we had a budget workshop meeting summary last Tuesday, and in there I think Supervisor Duran mentioned wanted to know what kind of precautionary things the county has undertaken in terms of what evil the state may do to us. And embodied in here the release of these funds is that for the last 2 fiscal years, I believe, contracts, and by joint agreement with the Resort Association, there's been a rather significant, call it chunk of money, set aside then in case the state were to, as they had proposed originally, take away gas tax monies that would customarily be spent for either transit or for snow removal, to put essentially in a reserve status some of the funds that would ordinarily go to infrastructure, I believe, so those monies could be redirected and not be allocated, so that we'd at least be able to provide the stellar snow removal service that our Public Works Department does. So that's the kind of precautionary things that we've done in different contracts to provide the wherewithal based upon what this state may or may not do to us. Fully expect to have a similar provision in the upcoming contract that will be probably brought to you sometime, maybe at your next board meeting up in Lake Tahoe. But those are the kind of things that we've been doing, trying to protect the ability to provide services over the last 2 years at least, even before this most recent budget maneuvers by the state of California.
Well, thank you, Tom. That's exactly the question I was going to ask you. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Jennifer?
I had a question, I think, for Ron, actually, if you wouldn't mind coming to the microphone.
Very temporary interim.
Yeah, the very temporary interim something.
One more day than I told you yesterday. Right?
Yeah. As you know, I've been an advocate for what I call the 4 Bs: beaches, bike paths, bathrooms, and bus stops. Yeah, beaches, bathrooms.
Oh, beaches, I'm sorry.
Beaches, not peaches. And I see that there are no dollars going to transportation here. Are bus stops considered transportation, or are they considered infrastructure?
Bus stops are in the infrastructure, the capital investment of building a new facility. And transportation funding, as has been the prerogative of the board, is a flexible funding that comes from infrastructure funds, so that in our past percentages for split of the normal TOT funding that is approved each year, it's 42% is for marketing money, 47% for infrastructure, and 11% for transportation. And we have, for the last 7 years, well exceeded the 11%, to where this year there was actually a few more dollars into transportation than into infrastructure. So that's still an ongoing need that is strengthening and strengthening. In fact, if I may, to speak to Mr. Duran's comment or concern that Tom addressed, in this same period of time when this money has been set aside in case there was other state things, there was money that hadn't traditionally been used, more money used for county services that were necessary for Eastern Placer County up here, like the baseline service of the TART system, where that had never been used. TOT hadn't been used for that. It had been used to enhance that system. But in order to provide the enhancements, we have to have the baseline, so that was there. And then there were some other county services that were for human services that were necessary in order to keep certain facilities, services available to the workers and residents up here that is not something that's going to be coming back. That was a determination to keep in this case, a dental clinic in operation too. Excuse me.
I just really wanted to make sure that we weren't precluding bus stops, because, as you know, it is kind of my particular hobby horse that it's great to have bus service, but, we see people standing out there in the pouring rain, the driving snow, and if we ever get summer, the hot sun, And I think it's really appropriate that we really focus on putting that basic infrastructure, the bus stops in, because it serves both the full-time residents, the seasonal employees who come up here, and most importantly, our visitors as well.
Absolutely, and we have participated in, through this summer, what will be 9 of those, and we have shown in our 5-year plan that funding for bus stops does continue as a proposal, assuming that DPW will continue to say we need more TOT funding to continue that improvement project.
Well, Peter's smiling back there at me. He knows that that is something I will be pushing for, so thank you for that clarification.
Anyone from the public want to address this item? With that, bring it back to the board for action.
I move we approve the First Amendment of the fiscal year 2010-11 North Lake Tahoe Resort Association contract to allocate $914,794 in fiscal year 2008-2009 and fiscal year 2009-2010 transient occupancy tax fund balance.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And item B is to approve an expenditure of $528,500 towards the Homeland Class 1 multipurpose trail and Truckee River Corridor Area Access Plan, which requires a budget revision. So, Jennifer?
The recommended expenditure of up to $528,500 in the Tahoe Transient Occupancy Tax Funds will support 4 specific projects: the Homewood Multipurpose Trail Environmental Document, Truckee River Corridor Access Plan Environmental Document, Amgen Tour of California Local Facility Maintenance, and the North Tahoe Public Utility District Park Playground Renovation. I've got some project details on each of those if you would like me to provide that to you. The Homewood Multipurpose Bike Trail Environmental Document request is $144,500. And this funds environmental documentation and compliance tasks as required by Caltrans for the 1 mile of missing link trail section in Homewood. All project components would be completed by the Tahoe City PUD. The application was made by the Tahoe City PUD to the Resort Association. And project construction is expected to start next summer. And funding for construction would be from the California Tahoe Conservancy and possibly Placer County Park dedication fees. The second project is the Truckee River Corridor Access Plan Environmental Document. That is $265,000. In order to implement the goals and objectives of the Placer County Planning Department's Truckee River Corridor Access Plan, a programmatic environmental document must be completed. The estimated cost of the document is $350,000. $85,000 in matching funds would be provided through an open space trust fund grant, and in-kind staff work also would be necessary to fill that funding gap to provide necessary background documentation. Proposed projects in the access plan to be analyzed in the environmental document would include bike and pedestrian trail construction, fishing and boating access, and wildlife, aquatic, and wetland habitat restoration, which is why the environmental document needs to be completed. Your third project in this request is for local facility maintenance needed to prepare for the Amgen Bike Tour race coming up in mid-May. The dollar amount on that is $75,000 to improve bicycle and pedestrian-based facilities in the North Lake Tahoe area. Improvements could include snow and debris removal on bike trails, patching to ensure that the roads and bike trails are accessible to cycling enthusiasts and spectators, are planned on Northstar Drive, Squaw Valley Road, bike trails that are owned and operated by both Placer County and the Tahoe City Public Utility District. In order to expend the county's portion of this funding, which is $32,000, a budget revision is required to increase the appropriation in the Squaw Valley Park County Service Area 28, Zone 162. A copy of the budget revision form is included in your packet, and that's also included in the recommended action. The recommended funding to date is based on rough estimates. because we don't know if it's going to continue to snow and if the potholes will continue to grow between now and mid-May, it's likely we will need to come back to your board at a future date to recommend additional expenditures given the unknown circumstances. Then the fourth and final project for requesting approval is the North Tahoe Regional Park Playground renovation. This expenditure would provide matching funds for the installation and renovation of playground equipment at the North Tahoe Public Utility District's Regional Park. North Tahoe PUD will be responsible for installation and ongoing maintenance of the facility. The total project cost is estimated at $550. Other funding has been committed to this project by 7 local funding sources, including $50,000 from the North Tahoe PUD. The equipment will significantly update older play structures and provides for ADA compliance. All of the projects are consistent with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association Tourism and Community Investment Master Plan, and your board's approval was unanimously recommended by the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association Board of Directors. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that there are some county staff folks as well as some project proponents from the different entities in the audience, should you have any questions.
Questions, comments? Jennifer.
Jennifer, I just have a couple clarifying questions. On the Homewood Multipurpose Trail,
yes,
there is a comment that it will likely result in minor private property acquisition. Is that all selling willing buyer? We're not talking eminent domain here.
I'm not sure if it all is. I know that they're trying to ensure that that occurs, but they're in the middle of the negotiation process. Ron, I don't know if you have any more updated information on that.
It is a negotiation, and anything that would go beyond willing buyers, it would be something that was done in conjunction with Caltrans, who is redoing the road through there too, who is going to need some change in easements that would allow the bike trails to fit in too. But it wouldn't be through the
And I
Tahoe City
believe we're
Public
talking
Utility
about
District.
minimal edge of right-of-way, maybe 3 feet, 5 feet.
But we're not talking about eminent domain at this point.
Correct.
No.
Okay. On the Truckee River Corridor Access Plan, I would encourage us, as part of that environmental document, that we look at putting in some bathrooms along the path, along the bike path, the double B there, the bathrooms and the bike path. It's my understanding that the sewer runs actually pretty much right under the bike path, so it just seems like there's a perfect opportunity to address some fairly serious ongoing environmental issues related to lack of adequate public facilities. Whatever it takes, but let's make sure that gets analyzed in the environmental document and we figure out how to make that part of the process. On the Amgen tour, can you explain a little bit about this $32,000 budget revision? You said it's required to increase the appropriation in the Squaw Valley Park service area. Are we adding $32,000 to the Squaw Valley budget, or
Yes.
taking $32,000 out of it?
Adding $2,000, appropriating it from the TOT fund to the facilities.
Perfect. I just did not want to face the outraged Squaw Valley Park group if we were taking $32,000 out of their
No,
park
they
funding.
should be happy because the roads and trails will be cleared earlier than they normally would have been.
Fabulous. And then I really just want to point out, no specific questions on the regional park, but I want to point out that, these are TOT dollars that are collected from people who come in and stay in our area, and they're being used really throughout the area. I mean, from the West Shore to, Tahoe City to the North Shore, all along the Truckee River. The Truckee River Corridor Access, Edmond, if I recall, it runs all the way down past Squaw Valley is the proposal. So these are, just really terrific proposed additions to the area, again, both for our full-time and part-time residents, but also for the people who just come up here to recreate. And all it's going to do is bring more TOT into the area. So thank you to the Resort Association specifically and to county staff for working on bringing this item forward. And if there's no other comments by the board or by the public, I would like to move that we approve the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association's proposed expenditure of up to $528,500 toward the Homewood Class 1 Multipurpose Trail and Truckee River Corridor Access Plan Program environmental documents, Amgen Tour of California facility maintenance, and the Regional Park playground equipment, and approve a budget revision to appropriate a portion of these funds to Placer County.
Seconded to adopt staff recommendation with regards to all of the aforementioned comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this item? See none? Ron? Sure.
If I can take a chance at jumping into the...
You don't have much time left.
Last
Take all
chance
this
as
in.
interim director.
3 minutes to get back to Tahoe City, but this has been so much more exciting. What I would like to do is make a brash assumption you're going to pass this, and tell you guys really how much we appreciate the support that we do get from the Board of Supervisors and the direction and support that we get from Tom and Beverly and from Jennifer Merchant too, that for us to be able to do the job that needs to be done up here, and to assure you that we do this as a community effort, that the Resort Association operates with 6 committees that are over 65 community members that give advice to the Resort Association Board of Directors so that they can make recommendations to you. So it's a well-vetted process, and also, again, deal with the North Tahoe Regional Advisory Commission too. That over the years here, in our, what is it now, 16 years of existence, we have put forth $19 million in infrastructure projects such as these that you've approved, that has helped to leverage and partnership with over $160 million from other sources in order to put the facilities on the ground. And that doesn't include the transportation efforts that have been made. So again, we look forward to continuing on with this. We're starting the TOT renewal process, of which we need to have that re-upped before the fall of 2012, so that we can continue this working relationship. And again, thank you for all that you've done to support the North Lake Tahoe area in this.
Well, on behalf of the board and personally, thank you, Ron. My view over all these years, the partnership that we have with the Resort Association is critically important. That dynamic is essential, which is not to say that it's always going to be easy, or we're not going to have to work at it, we're not going to have some disagreements, but without that kind of input from the community and the honing that we do with each other to be more sharp as to how we make these investments and utilize the resources we have and continue to keep the resources, it's critical. So appreciate all of your work and the effort of the Resort Association and your time as interim director. So look forward to continuing
working. It's been a real kick.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Hearing that, all those in favor of the...
We need
a fourth vote, right? So we need a roll call. So.
Yes.
Duran?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Weigand?
Yes. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 6, Public Works Kings Beach Watershed Improvements Project. Peter, and I see Edmund back there also. You here for this, Edmund? Or? Mike.
Good morning, Supervisor Wygant, members of the
Morning,
board.
Peter.
Yes, Peter Kratz, Public Works, here to present department item number 6 for your consideration. Thanks, Greg. I'll give you a couple of graphics here in a minute on this item. The action requested of you today is to adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign Professional Services Agreement number 1011, Amendment number 2, with the consultant Cardno Entrex in the amount of $252,300 for designing the next phase of the Kings Beach Watershed Improvement Project, and authorizing the Director of Public Works or his designee to approve and sign future amendments up to $25,230. As way of background on this project, the Watershed Improvement Project consists of various planned stormwater improvements along the county roads and right-of-way in the Kings Beach neighborhood. These improvements are separate from the stormwater improvements planned as part of the Commercial Core Improvement Project along the highway or down on State Route 28. For this design effort, the original request for proposal included all the work to plan, environmentally permit, and fully design water quality improvements within the Kings Beach watershed, but the RFP clearly stated that the work would be undertaken in phases based on available funding and refinement of future work based on stakeholder and an agency analysis and agreement on the preliminary work done in the earlier design phases. In addition, the original professional services agreement states that additional work could be awarded to the same consultant subject to the satisfaction of Public Works and our assessment of the consultant's quality of work. To date, the consultant has performed above our expectations to provide scope deliverables on time and within budget. All that said, the original PSA and Amendment Number 1 efforts totaling just over $2 million have progressed the Watershed Improvement Project design to the 50% design level, and with this Amendment Number 2 before you today, the Watershed Improvement Project design will be advanced to the 100% level in the residential area adjacent to the Commercial Core Improvement Project area, thereby allowing a potential economy of scale for agency permitting and consolidating construction efforts and getting a phase of what we call the WIP ready for construction in 2012. And just a quick graphic on this and a little bit of what I talked about yesterday. We're down here on the highway with the Commercial Core Improvement Projects with lots of drainage infrastructure as part of that project. We've always had what's called the WIP, which is mainly all these improvements up in the Fish and Mammal County road streets up here, and also improvements down along Brockway Vista and Sea-Cline that's actually down gradient of the highway. And that's what's important today is we want to design this phase, and part of the drainage infrastructure that crosses the highway that wasn't included in the Commercial Core Improvement Project. So somewhat convoluted, two major, I'll say, watershed improvement efforts going on, both in what I call the core area that's contained within my presentation of yesterday, and then what we're doing outside of that to really clean the water as much as we can before it gets down to the highway water. Thereby, when we get water into the lake through all this developed area, it's as clean as can be. So with that said, this PSA is exempt from CEQA. It's fully funded and included in the department's current and next year's fiscal budget. And so with that, request for your approval of this item. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
Yeah, real quick, the 25 to 30, that's the 10% retention, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
What is an asphalt
Asphalt
dike?
dike.
It says proposed improvements include revegetating the existing roadway shoulders, installation of asphalt dikes, trench drains and culverts to convey stormwater runoff, and installation of sediment removal infiltration structures to provide treatment of stormwater runoff. I know what most of that is. I don't know what an asphalt dike is.
A dike is usually it's a shoulder treatment along the roadway edge. Instead of using concrete, which we often do is we denote as curbs. We'll put in, we call it a dike sometimes. And again, it just controls the stormwater flow along the roadway to keep from eroding the shoulder. So it's a raised, kind of like a curb, like a concrete curb.
Okay, I'm a little concerned with that because of snow removal. I know that where we've had these similar structures on Donner Summit, they're
Right.
instantly destroyed
Yep.
within a winter.
And I apologize, a lot of our project descriptions sometimes get antiquated. We've moved almost entirely away from asphalt dikes based on exactly your concern, that they get ripped out by snow removal, and the likelihood improvements that we do in this project and future projects, in all of our water quality projects, tend to be concrete based, knowing that they need to perform long term.
Glad to hear it. I'd
Yeah.
rather do it once for a little bit extra cost than have to repeat ourselves
You bet.
multiple times. Thank you.
Comment on this? Seen none?
All right, I move we adopt a resolution authorizing the chairman to sign professional services agreement PSA number 1011, amendment number 2, with the consultant Cardno Entrix Inc., formerly Entrix Inc., in the amount of $252,300, bringing the total contract amount to $2,252,572 for designing the next phase of the Kings Beach Watershed Improvement Project, and authorizing the Director of Public Works or his designee to approve and sign future amendments up to $25,230.
Second.
Moved and seconded twice to approve staff recommendation as per our discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no closed session for 2 days in a row. A record, I think. So we are